I'd like to introduce Josh Collins. He is a homeless activist and advocate, and Donna Acevedo,
Nelson.
Excuse me?
Acevedo Nelson.
Acevedo Nelson, who is going to be sharing a personal story about the criminalization of homelessness. I just first wanted to start. I was really struck by Daisy's presentation and the idea that this is the first time in how many decades? 4 decades?
4 decades.
That we have 2 candidates for each one of these really important positions. I mean, an elected official, this is supposed to be a government by the people, for the people, right? And so that means when we express our voice through making a choice and voting in an election, that's very powerful. But also, after the election, these elected officials, they're outward looking. They work for us. And so we still need to express our political voice, no matter who becomes elected in these positions, and let them know, what we want out of these candidates. Daisy and the rest of the presenters talked a little bit about the great amount of discretion that these positions, that people in these positions hold in how they in how they do their job, the kinds of decisions that they make, that can really almost be life or death decisions for some of the people that we care about. So we're going to talk about what we're calling, what the ACLU calls the criminalization of homelessness. We know that homelessness is a huge issue in Orange County. According to recent polling, it was basically affordable housing and homelessness were the #1 issues that people raised in polling. So does anybody have an idea of what we mean by criminalizing homelessness? Yeah.
Basically, it's a crime to be homeless now. I know that, for example, the city of Stanton, I personally knew of being homeless. I used to work there, and there was this one man named Corey. He literally told me he just got out of Garden Grove jail because he was homeless, because he was sleeping on the side of a building. Mm-hmm. So now, so if you're homeless, basically you can get ticketed. I've seen it happen in Santa Ana, Stanton, Garden Grove. It happens all the time. They will be just minding their own business, and here comes SWAT. And they were like, oh, here's a ticket because you have a dog. Here's a ticket because you have that. So being homeless now means that you're a criminal. It's not because you don't have a home and it's not an option. It's because it happens. It's just the way Orange County now is hard to live here.
Yeah, and so I'm just going to briefly summarize. What's your name?
Rosa.
Rosa. I'm going to briefly summarize what Rosa said because it was just perfect in case people couldn't hear it. But that it's actually a crime to be homeless. And what does it mean to be homeless? It means, that you're living outside. Why are you living outside? It takes about a $30 an hour job to afford just a run-of-the-mill one bedroom apartment in Orange County. I mean, and what about affordable housing? Well, if any of you have ever thought about, gee, I wonder if I, qualified for affordable housing. You go to the different lists and they're all closed. You can't even get on the list for affordable housing, right? And so you might wait for years for that list to open for 2 weeks. And then you hurry up and you get on the list, but that's not it. Now you're going to wait another 5, 7, sometimes 10 years to get to the top of that list. And maybe hopefully get housing that you can actually afford in this very expensive county, right? So, but instead of treating homelessness as a humanitarian crisis, people sleeping outside because they're too poor to afford an apartment, too often the county and the cities treat it like a crime. Well, how is that super wrong-headed? So for example, if I'm driving down the road, I'm driving recklessly or I'm going too fast and I'm endangering other people, I might get a citation by the police, right? So what is that citation for? I mean, I already endangered people. Why am I really getting a citation? What's the point of
breaking laws.
What's that?
You were breaking laws.
I was breaking laws, but what's the hope? That in giving me a citation, I won't do it again. I won't do it again. So it's going to deter me from engaging in that behavior again, and therefore enhance public safety, the safety of myself and the safety of other people, right? That's kind of that's the logic of citing people. Well, where's the logic when you're citing somebody from laying down and going to sleep on the ground when they literally have no place else to go? We all have to lay down sometimes. We all have to fall asleep sometimes. We all have to rest sometimes, right? I mean, there's a bunch of other ordinances that that this county and its cities enforce against people who are homeless. So there's really no logic to it, but yet at the same time there is. So given that we can't deter people from being homeless, that we should really be, investing in affordable housing when we're not. What do you think the true purpose of enforcing these ordinances is?
Get rid of the homeless.
Do people, who else? Does that make sense? So every time most of the people I talk to who are impacted people, are experiencing homelessness and have encounters with law enforcement, it's not just giving them a citation. The law enforcement officer will also say, we usually knows these people by name because they're targeting them all the time, harassing them, right? Giving them citations they can't afford to pay, and they can't avoid, right? They can't avoid them because they can't not lay down and fall asleep sometimes. They say, you know what, if you get out of town, you're not going to see me anymore. You go somewhere else. So it's really this sort of parochial politics about being so mean to people who are some of the most vulnerable people in our society, right? Being so mean to them and persecuting them, getting them, wrapped up and swept up in the criminal justice system. It's really to sort of, encourage people to go somewhere else and be another city or county's problem. And that is not the county we are, right? That is not aligned with our values. So what I want to say is that whoever becomes the DA, whoever becomes the sheriff, these are outward-facing positions. We should expect these elected officials, our top law enforcement officials, to educate the public, to educate cities, and to insist that we treat our most economically vulnerable and marginalized people who are experiencing a crisis in this county with dignity and respect. That we respect their rights, their constitutional rights, and that we respect them as human beings that deserve to be treated with empathy and actually with the resources that every person needs for survival, because these people are really in survival mode, right? They're really in survival mode. I'll just say one other thing, which is that there was a recent Ninth Circuit decision called Martin versus Boise, Idaho. Has anybody heard of that? So what it says, and this is something the ACLU was not part of this lawsuit, but this is something that we've been arguing for a long time, which is that it is cruel and unusual punishment under the Eighth Amendment. So the Eighth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution prohibits cruel and unusual punishment, like torture. So the argument has been that it is cruel and unusual punishment to enforce these types of ordinances against people experiencing homelessness when they literally have nowhere else to go. So in a county like Orange County, where there's about one shelter bed for every 2 people experiencing homelessness, leaving half of them sleeping outside by necessity, no affordable housing, long wait lists that you can't get on, it's really unconstitutional. It's violating people's constitutional rights to enforce these ordinances. Now we've been arguing that for a long time. We like to bring it up because it kind of exposes the deep hypocrisy of the county and its cities that enforce these ordinances and sort of pretend that this is a choice, that being homeless is a choice that can be deterred, right? So, so it should be, you know, I mean, this is something that we have to hold our sheriff, coroner, and our DA, you know, accountable for, is to make sure that this county and its cities are not violating the rights of people experiencing homelessness and are treating this as the humanitarian crisis that it is. Any thoughts or reflections on that?
So the supervisors right now have tens of millions of dollars that have already been earmarked to spend to help homelessness, and they're not doing that. And so then we have a supervisor who's had been a vote on not spending that money, running for district attorney against a district attorney who's corrupt, and so that seems like a big bag full of,
you know, and so once, so this is, I mean, the issue in Orange County is that, you know, so here's my thoughts on that. Don't give up. Don't continue to hold these elected officials accountable. That's what we do in a democracy. And speak out and educate your friends, your neighbors too.
So would the steps be to then hold the supervisors accountable, because they actually have money that they can spend? The idea that, I mean, I think sheriff is actually, there's something there that could turn positive with one of the candidates that's maybe walking through the room right now. Sorry. But district attorney doesn't appear like that's going to be helpful. So to put the pressure on supervisors seems like that, to spend that money and to allocate that money to help with the homeless situation. I'm just asking if
no,
I'm doing that right,
I think you're spot on. So what's your name again?
My name's Bethany Webb.
Bethany. So what Bethany was saying is that we should be putting pressure on our Board of Supervisors too to spend the money they have. This is an incredibly wealthy county, and it's really actually a quite small problem compared to some place like Los Angeles, right? I mean, we have like about 0.25% of our population actually is homeless, and it would take, you know, it would just be a drop in the bucket for this county to solve the problem. But they don't hear, I don't think, from enough constituents. I mean, we're trying to change that. That's my other life, you know, doing like Board of Supervisors advocacy. So you're spot on that. That's absolutely right in terms of affirmative solutions, right? They hold the purse strings. I think the sheriff coroner, you know, can be a public spokesperson to educate the public and the cities about, like, don't criminalize. Now, if we don't criminalize, people are still sleeping on the street, right? So we need both. We need the affirmative solutions, and we need, so I'm going to go here and here. And we need to stop persecuting people who are experiencing homelessness. It's very tough on them. It's very, very tough.
The only way that this is ever going to get issued, more people show up to Board of Supervisors meetings, because the same people always show up. I've been to a few myself, and I've spoken up, and I know what it is to talk to them and have a blank stare. They ignore you. They blatantly just don't even, like, oh, it's the same person, it's the same person. So I understand what she's saying, because if you have a concern, you need to show up, because the same people always go up to the mic, and it's like, oh, it's her again, it's this person again. But if you don't show up and you're here, no one's hearing you. No one's going to hear us. That's why it's like, it sucks to go and sit there for hours, and sometimes you're not even heard. But it's worth it, so they show that the community out here who wants to change. Because if we don't do something first, it's not going to change.
It is about
the sheriff. So you mentioned the sheriff, because I mean that does seem to be an opening where the sheriff could be an advocate that could show up with us at the, so if we elected the right sheriff, we could maybe have an advocate that could go into the supervisors or make recommendations on working with the homeless as instead of penalizing it.
Exactly. Exactly. That's what we should be expecting out of our sheriff.
And our church has a big porch in front of it. And when we come in on Sunday mornings, homeless people have been sleeping there because they have pooped on it, they have peed on it, and we know that they're not in the right minds, in order to do that. So it's not just affordable housing, it's got to have a component for mental health as well, because so many of them have mental health issues, and we know that that's, we're in danger. But if we have a homeless solution, public properties like our church and the others are not in danger, going to be less, they're not going to be used because there's someplace now for these people to go. So it's to our benefit to have this, to have solutions, but it's not just, affordable housing is the number one, of course, but components to deal with this problem have got to include mental health.
So tell me your name again.
I'm Susan Hernandez, I'm pastor of a Hispanic Baptist church.
So Susan was just saying there needs to be a mental health component as well, and people with mental health issues are overrepresented within the homeless population. Obviously, if you have any form of disability, it's harder to, it's harder to work sometimes, and because our safety net is very weak, people just sometimes, if they lose their job or if they're not able to work for a certain period of time and don't have a family to take care of them, it's like just a one-way ticket to homelessness.
And without insurance, there's no medication.
Right, exactly. And so, and so there's affordable housing. There's also what's called permanent supportive housing, which is affordable housing with all of those services that people might need. I do want to introduce, I think, next, Josh Collins, who's going to talk a little bit about it, and he has some handouts too.
Yeah, I passed them already.
Okay, so he passed them out. Yeah, I don't know where they are, but just a little bit about the cost to the taxpayer, right? Of like both criminalizing homelessness and then not investing in these, in affirmative solutions to homelessness.
Okay, yeah, so my name is R.Joshua Collins. I'm the founder of Homeless Advocates for Christ. I'm an ex-math instructor, and God actually called me to live with the homeless, and I did that for over 10 years. And I started up in Spokane, Washington, so I have a very good understanding, as you can imagine. I started up in Spokane, Washington, and I got here in Anaheim area about 2013. So I've personally experienced the criminalization and the discrimination, all that. I don't do drugs, I don't do alcohol, none of that, and I've still been discriminated against as a homeless person. So I'm very passionate about this. I have a lot of YouTube videos. My YouTube channel is R.Joshua Collins. You can check that out if you'd like on YouTube and see all the filming of the police and all that I do. But I think one thing that would be good to ask, whether it be the DA or whether it be a sheriff, is ask the homeless people in their area how they've been treated by these people, right? If you know that this previous sheriff or the sheriff right now that's running, ask the homeless how are they treating you? How have you been treated by the sheriff department? Bottom line, right? That's how you're going to find out what they're really about. You know what I mean? So regardless of what they say, but some of the numbers on this sheet here, I just kind of went through it, and there's a lot of, unfortunately, mismanagement of funds. If you look on the bottom there of that sheet, there's a little white circle there that says 299 million. So that's how much money was spent for the homeless over 2014 and 2015, right? For the homeless issue in the county. So that's 299 million, and we have 4,500 homeless people. Right? So they spent that much money on these people. So I just kind of went on a run. I said, wow, that's a lot of money. I'm thinking to myself, let me do some math on this. So I checked it out, and we divided it, right? So 299 million divided by 4,500 people, that's $66,444 per homeless person a year. Okay? $66,444 per year for each homeless person. That's how much they spent. Okay, so then I just took out, well, let's say an apartment's $1,500, and we'll multiply that by 12, so that's $18,000 a year, right, for the housing factor. Okay, so we'll subtract that from $66,444, and they'll have $48,444 left after they pay their rent a year. right? So that tells you kind of, gives you a little snapshot, I guess, of how the money has unfortunately been mismanaged in the county, and it's really sad to see that, right? But I think we do a lot better. I think if the law enforcement is educated on this, of course we know that regarding the cost of housing and the poverty wages that people are being paid, that's just going to cause homelessness to increase, so it's not a problem that's going to go anytime soon. If you'll see on this sheet right here, same side as this little 299 million there, we have homelessness increased from 4,500 to 4,800 in 2017. So we have 300 more homeless from 2015 to 2017. So I don't see this problem, getting smaller, right? And obviously UCI didn't either. This is a great study. So criminalization is not the answer, like we talked about. This is one thing I just thought about during this talk is profiting off of the detention of others, right? That we know the system kind of does that, right? That's an immediate conflict of interest, isn't it? Immediately it's a conflict of interest. If I can get paid to put you in jail, what is my incentive not to put you in jail? Right? So that whole system needs to change. That's the sad situation with our justice system, right? So personal stories. I know a mentally ill man named Jim that I used to camp out with, and Jim eventually lost all his property. He was just sitting on a park bench with his property. Police came and took it all in Anaheim. Right? They passed these two laws: no property in parks and public spaces, basically no storage of property they call it, and then no camping. Right? Obviously affecting the homeless. You look at AMC Chapter 11, that's Anaheim Municipal Code Chapter 11. It talks about all the laws against the homeless. You'll see they outlaw tarps, sleeping bags, right? Obvious things that homeless people are gonna need in public spaces, any public space, whether it be a sidewalk, whether it be a park, wherever. So I think we really need a sheriff that would fight against those types of laws, right? As well as a DA that would fight against those kind of laws and not support that. We need to repeal those kind of laws, because obviously it's like discrimination. It's like segregation when they said, an African American can't be in this spot or that space or whatever. So if we have a homeless person with a sleeping bag coming into a park, you shouldn't have to worry about getting arrested or harassed or ticketed, right? But that's the kind of laws that we have right now in Anaheim. And you can see that in, like I said, Chapter 11 of Anaheim Municipal Code law. So we know the cost of criminalization, of course. People's lives are devastated. I have a friend, Patsy. She's now living in a kind of like a care, they take care of elderly people. But she had a stroke, she had a heart attack. She was on the streets for years, over and over, going to jail. She's like 60, probably 61 right now. And I knew her for years, and on the streets with her, And she was a tough cookie. She would go in and out of jail. They take all her property, they take all her medication. She'd go off to go to a doctor's appointment with a note on her property explaining that she'd be back to get her property. And Officer Edgar Hampton, I remember, went and took it anyway. And I was filming the whole thing. I got it all on video, right? So she comes back and her property's gone. She's flipping out, But that kind of stuff is what happens in Anaheim, And of course other cities too. So myself, I've been arrested for filming the police in Anaheim. I got arrested a lot in Vegas for standing up for the rights of the homeless. Over 30 arrests in Vegas for preaching and getting arrested, and for fighting for the rights of the homeless and getting arrested. So I know all about going in and out of the system, and then you can see the corruption from the inside a lot of times too, right? And things that are unfair and unjust. But that's kind of something I wanted to share. Of course, there's a lot of 8th Amendment and 4th Amendment violations. So Anaheim and the county owe the homeless community, in a big way. They've destroyed a lot of property. They've taken a lot of people's freedom over and over and over, year after year. So there needs to be reparations for that, So we need, of course, affordable housing. We need supportive housing, as we all know, and all that. And a sheriff that would influence the state policy, and a DA that would influence the state policy to do those types of things, to create housing for those in need. And that would listen to the community also. That's important. So I just encourage you guys to look at the candidates carefully. Of course, this is a great sheet too. Just to maybe you can quiz the sheriff or ask them if they know about this. The candidate. See if they really know about all this kind of stuff. And And this is a really great study. See if they really care, you know. And I'm not going to say his name, but I won't even say his name.
That's it. No, seriously.
I won't say his name.
Okay.
I didn't say his name. Okay, so just. It's
You
okay.
like John Wayne?
Yeah. Yeah, but anyways, that's probably all. If you have any questions, go ahead. Do you have any questions, anybody? As far as, I think I'll wrap it up right here, but does anyone have any questions about anything? Pretty straightforward. Okay, so I have, if you guys, anyone
Oh,
want
one
to?
question over
Oh,
here.
sorry,
One
go ahead.
question.
So recently, a judge went forward the county, right, to make sure homeless people in Irvine had somewhere to stay. After those 30 days they were in the hotels, what happened to most of them? I know myself because my church picks up people from high school. And the woman there told me that they were just going into the gymnasium, bringing in beds to get these people, it's only women out there. And so just to get them off the streets, but it was so conflicting because the mental status. So what happened to all these people after that? And what happens to them?
Yeah, a lot of them are actually in the parks that I visit, like Maxwell Park. You know, some of them end up there, but there's some that have gotten housing too. Some of them have been placed, but there's a lot of them kind of fallen through the cracks. They haven't got the assistance that was basically kind of promised, I think, through the litigation, right? So that's another disappointing factor. I actually just interviewed about this, but that's the thing is a lot of what was promised wasn't delivered, and I think that when they went in to evacuate everyone from the riverbed, they didn't plan it out very well. They didn't put enough funding into what they were going to do. They didn't have a bunch of housing prepared for all these people to go to, right? So you end up with a disaster, you know, and like, you know, like people got kicked out of the Baymont recently, and you know, some of the other situations where the motel they were put in wasn't very clean, you know, and those types of things, and just caused some dangers to people's health and that kind of thing. So just a great lack of funding and resources, and I think they just tried to make it kind of winging it. Basically, what I saw, I was out there on the riverbed at Camp Hope, you know, with the homeless camping out there while they were clearing it, filming, and seeing this. It was like they were just winging it, you know, a lot of times. They didn't have things in order and prepared well, so it's unfortunate. Go ahead.
And also, I read that, and they wanted a parking lot area in Irvine, right? You just throw them all in there. That didn't happen either, right? To like secure everybody, and they're trying to make every city accountable
Yeah.
for their homeless population.
Yeah.
They're just dropping them off. And here in Santa Ana, that's why that situation happened.
Yeah.
there. So what happened with that?
Well, this is the thing. Irvine, they really protested. They didn't want any homeless there, period. But this is the thing. This was interesting about Irvine, is they actually came to the Board of Supervisors meeting, and they were saying they wanted housing, not tents. And I was kind of shocked by that, because I was like, wow. They're not just saying, you know, get rid of all the homeless, you know, out of the world. You know, they're actually asking for housing for these people, not just tents. They wanted like permanent solutions type thing. So I think they're on the right page with that. That's kind of the same thing